WENJ.com has been around this Eagles franchise since 1985. And as he writes today, over at NJ.com, former Eagles head coach Buddy Ryan was one of a kind. And he's now with us here on the Sports Bash 97.3 ESPN. Sad day, Mark, and I know you've been around this team for a long, long time, but I can't imagine there is a more colorful couple of years than the Buddy Ryan era in Philadelphia.
No, not at all. And it's funny because I just started, as you mentioned, my first year was 85, which was Marion Campbell's last year. And it's kind of boring, to be honest. The team wasn't very good. Marion wasn't very, quotable. The team had kind of, morphed into a bad football team. And then Buddy comes in 86, and again, it's only my second year, so I'm still kind of wide-eyed. I'm still kind of learning as we go. I think I'm 20-some years old, 24, 25 years old at the time. And it was like, wow. Wow. It was just, you never knew what to expect from Buddy. And it was always the unexpected. And it was fun. I mean, in 30-some years now of covering a team, by far the most fun. The 5 years of covering Buddy, and even the players that he brought in, Randall was there, but, Keith Jackson, Keith Byers, Seth Joyner, Clyde Simmons, Jerome Brown, Eric Allen, I can go on and on. Just a great bunch of guys to cover too. They were colorful. They always had something to say. I mean, they were, so it was a fun. I mean, I always say, and I don't really care if the team wins or loses. I mean, I'm there to cover them, but I kind of wish that team would have won a Super Bowl or even gotten to a Super Bowl, because that would have been, God knows what they would have done the week of the Super Bowl, or what Buddy would have said. Because keep in mind, we're talking, to younger people listening. It was a different world then. There wasn't social media. There wasn't an internet. I mean, so like Buddy was like, you had to read about it. There wasn't, God forbid people actually read then, right? But there was Buddy, and Buddy had his radio show, so there was that. But there wasn't, word didn't get out. And, so like the Super Bowl would have been at a time where the world would have been following him. It wouldn't have just been the guys in Philly. So that was my one thing. I really wish that he could have, that team, Buddy and that team could have gone further.
Mark Eckel's with us. When he entered Philadelphia, he says, you've got a winner in town, and that kind of started everything. Can you kind of, you chronicle, you touch on it a bit, but how football changed in Philly because of Buddy, because it seemed like there was a little bit of a down period after Vermeil left, and it seemed like football was kind of lagging behind because the other teams were really good in town.
Sure, and the Eagles were, I mean, again, from 82, which was Vermeil's last year, I believe, right? That was a strike year, through 85. They were bad. I mean, they were, they weren't the worst team in the league, but they were bad. They were 6-10, 7-9. They're under 500, never really in the race, and boring. They were a boring team. They had become the defense. They played the 3-4. It was, they bend but don't break. The offense, Jaworski was getting a little older. Montgomery they traded him in 85, but he had been banged up a little bit. So it just wasn't, and it's hard to imagine by today's standards, but they didn't sell out games. The games were actually blacked out. There were games that were blacked out locally because they hadn't sold enough tickets. Imagine that today. I mean, it's unfathomable for someone listening now saying, what do you mean the game wasn't on TV? No, the Eagles games they didn't sell enough tickets, weren't on local television. That's really how bad it had gotten. And here comes Buddy Ryan, and keep in mind, he comes in fresh from the Bears Super Bowl, which they won, and if you remember, going back in time, the players carried him and Mike Ditka off the field after they won that Super Bowl. That's how much he was loved by those Chicago Bears players, Mike Singletary and that group. So here he comes. So he's a big name coming into town, and he's not bashful, but he wasn't bashful. So like you said, he comes in. We're going to win here. I'll never forget, and I mentioned this in my column. We're at Westchester early during training camp, and then for some reason he was addressing the crowd, or somebody was talking to the crowd, and Buddy grabs the microphone and tells the crowd, "We're going to win the NFC East, and we're going to sweep through the division. We're not going to lose the game in the NFC." And the people go crazy, and they're eating this stuff up. Now, of course, they still weren't good in '86. I mean, he wasn't going to change everything in one year, but this, to say that kind of stuff and get people riled up. But the one thing he did do, and I remember Buddy and I did get very close over the years, And he said when he got to town, the first thing people told him was, you have to beat the Cowboys. If you beat the Cowboys, it doesn't matter what else you do, but just beat the Cowboys. Well, he kind of owned the Cowboys. I think if I'm not mistaken, he was 8-1 in non-strike games against the Cowboys. And he liked giving it to first Landry and then Jimmy Johnson, and again the Eagle fans, because of their hatred of the Cowboys, just made it even more special for him. The way he beat the Cowboys year after year after year.
Yeah, he had no bias. Either coach, as long as they were wearing Cowboys colors. Now, you touched on it. Mark Eckel's with us here on the Sports Bash, and you touched on 87 and the strike year. How much did that endear himself to his players, the way he handled the labor situation?
Oh, so much so. And I know I've talked to players about this through the years, and what he told them was, listen, I don't care what you do. Just do it together. If you all want to come in and break the picket, cross the picket line and play, great, but you all better come in. If you all want to stay out, that's fine too. And I'll make do with what we got during the strike, but do it together. I don't want a splintered team. You guys are together on this. I can't be I'm not even he wasn't allowed to talk to him, but he kind of got through, there was messengers that they both used, but
carrier pigeon, yes.
exactly. And that's what it was back then too, right? But no, but and the team saw that and knew that he had their back, and I think that was a big turning point. Because if you remember, Ajax at 86 wasn't a good year. They were 5-10-1. The strike happened early in 87. They were, I think, 1-1 maybe when the strike hit, and then they lost all 3 strike games. But then they came back and played very well after the strike ended in 87. They finished, I believe, 7-8, but the actual real players were 7-5. And then boom, it took off in 88, 89, 90. They won the division, made the playoffs all three years. So yeah, that was definitely a turning point of the Buddy Ryan era, the strike season and his commitment to his players.
So Mike and I were talking earlier in the show about there's not many coaches that have multiple games that have nicknames after them, Bounty Bowl or Pork Chop Bowl or Body Bag Bowl, Fog, right? So which one of those to you in your time covering Buddy Ryan stands out the most and is the most memorable for you, Mark?
Oh, the Fog Bowl. The Fog Bowl, without a doubt. If I could pump this up, if you don't mind, I have another book coming out. It should be out in August, hopefully maybe September, called the Big 50, and it's just 50 chapters of Eagles football, whatever I wanted it to be. It could be a player, a team, whatever. And I have a whole chapter on the Fog Bowl because it was I always say it was the greatest game I never saw because you couldn't see. But yeah, that game and just the whole leading up to that game, it was Eagles Bears. It was Buddy going back to Chicago to face Ditka, his arch nemesis. Face the guys that still loved him, Singletary and Wilbur Marshall, and those guys were still on the Bears. And that's Buddy's famous line. When they found out they were playing the Bears, because back then, the Eagles had a bye and the Bears had a bye, but you didn't know, depending on who won the wild card game, right, determined who was playing who. Because back then you couldn't play a team in your division. So I believe the Vikings played the Rams, and had the Vikings won, the Vikings would have played the Eagles, and the Rams would have played the Bears or something. But the Rams, the way it turned out, the Eagles had to play the Bears, and I guess the 49ers played the Vikings. That's what it was. So, but we find out the Bears, the Eagles play, and Buddy starts with, can't wait to get back to Chicago. We're not going to sneak into town. We're gonna drive around the field, the lights on and the horns blowing. And what do you think he's speaking metaphorically? Like, we're not going to sneak into town. We're letting the Bears know. No, he really drove around the stadium with the whole lights on and the horns blaring. I remember talking to Jeff Fisher, years, through the years, and he'll bring it up, Rob bring it up, and he'll say, like, I still can't believe we actually did that. We land, we're at the airport, we get on a bus, instead of driving from the airport right to the hotel, no, they go out of their way and drive around. They literally drove around Soldier Field, lights on, horns blowing. Like, there was nobody there but them, but it was the middle of the afternoon on a Friday.
I think there was a photographer there because I remember that picture in the paper.
Yes. Well, no, you're right. You're right about that. I meant like the Bears weren't there. But no, it was just that. So that leads up to it, and then the game itself. It was, if I remember, as I remember it's New Year's Eve. The game was played New Year's Eve day, and the night before, I remember being in Chicago, and I packed very heavy clothes to wear, thinking it's going to be very, very cold. It's December. It's Chicago, and being out that night, and all of us saying, man, it's a lot warmer than I thought it would be. I mean, it wasn't only one. It wasn't like 60 or 65, but it was a lot warmer. It wasn't typical Chicago winter, and that warm front mixed in with coming off, the weather coming in off the lake, and next thing you knew, the fog rolled in and nobody could see, and it was the craziest game ever.
Meteorologist Mark Eckel with us. No, it's a sports
right.
Mark Eckel from NJ.com. Has been on the Eagles beat since 1985, been around the team since 85. That's his first year covering the team. Of course, the next year, Buddy is hired, and he referred to the owner as the guy in France. How much did his odd relationship with Eagles ownership attribute to his exit from Philly? Do you think or was it the 0-3 record, or was it just that they just said enough's enough, this guy's done?
Well, it was a combination of both guys. It was, Braman used the 0-3. Norman Braman used the 0-3 record in the playoffs as a reason to be able to fire him. Now, because if he wins those games, you can't fire him, right? So, but it was Buddy. Like I said about the strike, how that his commitment to the players endeared him to those guys forever, and it did spark a turnaround of the team. But as he endeared himself to the players, he kind of pulled himself away from management, because he didn't show any respect at all to Norman Braman or Harry Gamble. It was kind of funny back then, but eventually, if you're going to do that, you better go far in the playoffs, and he didn't. So that gave them a reason to fire him. And I believe that he didn't get fired for losing those playoff games, because let's be honest, as we had said, the Eagles were so bad before he got there that making the playoffs was pretty good accomplishment. And he lost to three pretty good teams. He lost to the Bears in the fog. He couldn't really, that was a tough loss. A pretty good Rams team beat him, and then a Redskins team that they probably should have beaten at home. They had a couple injuries that week before. I'm not making excuses. They had beaten the Redskins earlier in the year in the infamous body bag game, another thing with a nickname. But that gave Raymond, the reason to go and say, all right, listen, we're not getting any further. We've hit a plateau. I'm going to fire you. And he fired him, hired Rich Kotite, and the team went back downhill again for a little bit.
I heard Mike Golick this morning talk about how the locker room was kind of a free-for-all. Like, he didn't care what went on in there as long as you came to play on Sunday. Yep. So as a young reporter at that time, were there things that you saw then and now, knowing what you know, that you cannot believe that you saw back then?
That's great.
Absolutely. Oh, yeah, it was. But again, I didn't know. Again, I'm walking in there not knowing. I had covered high school sports for a couple of years prior to this. Now I'm covered. I thought this was the way it was. I thought, okay, this is the NFL. This is how guys are. This is how locker rooms are. No, it was a once-in-a-lifetime experience that I didn't realize I was experiencing. But like I said, the players were great. They were all it was so different then. There weren't as many of us in the media, so you got to know the guys better, and they got to know you better. I still talk to a lot of those guys. I really do. Randall and Seth. Unfortunately, we've lost a few of those guys. That's the thing. Right. Buddy's hanging out now with Reggie and Jerome and Andre. They're all together again. No, it was a once in a lifetime. And like I said, since then, don't get me wrong, there have been other good groups of guys and a lot, but not like that. That was just a different. They would go bowling together every Monday night. Actually, and almost every guy on the team went out bowling. Who does that? That doesn't happen anywhere, I don't think, right? And again, though, and that's what Buddy wanted. Buddy wanted. He believed that if the players liked each other and they got along and they did things together, that you would see a better team on the field on Sundays. And I think he was right for the most part, because those guys did love each other and they played hard for each other. And they, like I said, they all hung out together and they did crazy things in the locker room. It was different. It was certainly different.
We're spending a little time with Mark Eckel talking about the colorful life and unfortunate passing of James David Buddy Ryan. And one of the things, Mark, that he said or was quoted for was, "I've never been fired for winning." And in fact, that was one of his horses, fired for winning.
Yes.
So once he did get fired from the Eagles, how much contact did you have with him, or how much were you able to stay in touch with him through the years?
Oh, a lot. And actually, that's the thing. We crazy to say, we became closer. Because when you're covering a guy, you try not to get too close to the guy you're covering because sometimes you have to criticize him or whatever, But but I did get along with Buddy through his 5 years. But after when he was, especially the years he was out, if you remember, he got fired. He was up for the Tampa Bay job right away, didn't get it, and then kind of took a couple years off. Actually did some TV, I think, for a year.
For CNN.
Yeah, so we talked a lot, almost once a week. He would, either I would call him or he would call me, and we would talk about what was going on with the team and, with this guy and that guy. And so we talked a lot. And then he became the coordinator in Houston under Jack Pardee, and he was busier, so we didn't talk quite as much. But I'd get a call every once and again.
Punching Kevin Gilbride?
Yeah, that's when that led to the Kevin Gilbride incident. That became pretty famous when he got tired of the run and shoot offense and took a little swing at Gilbride. I got to tell you this story too. We're out in Arizona. The Eagles now he gets a head coaching job in Arizona, and I convinced my sports editor at the time. I was working at the Trenton Times then, and to send me out to Arizona a few days early. Because I'll do some stories on Buddy, and I believe a couple of the players were there then as well, Seth Joyner, Clyde Simmons, I think, Andre Waters. So I go out to Arizona, I guess I flew out maybe Wednesday or Thursday, and I'm going to the Cardinals practice, and I go into the Cardinals offices. I see the PR guy. I tell him he knew who I was from covering the teams and stuff, and all right, great, Mark, here's some stuff, blah, blah, blah. So I'm he says, yeah, here's our room you can work in, and practice starts whatever time. So I start walking out to practice, and he grabbed, "Oh, Mark, listen, I'm sorry, I didn't tell you this. Out-of-town writers can't come to practice." So, but Buddy sees us on the field and yells over to his PR guy. I think his name was Greg. He yells over, "Greg, it's all right. He's with us." and Buddy let me watch practice.
Good stuff from Mark Eckel here. Mark, I'd like to get your take, too, on, because as we kind of hinted at earlier, the Eagles were kind of lagging behind. I mean, the Sixers had won the championship. The Phillies were really good. The Flyers were still pretty good. How much is Buddy's imprint on the fan base as we know it today, what it became? I mean, it's clearly the number one team in town now, right? Is it because of the gangrene Buddy Ryan era Eagles?
I might be biased, but I say absolutely yes. And again, I saw it firsthand. Like you said, the Eagles had become an afterthought. They really had. Like you said, the other teams were good. The Phillies especially, right? That's when they were on their little run there. They had gone to the World Series twice, 80 and 83, right? And I'm 5 years, right?
Yep, absolutely. You nailed it.
Okay. And then I said the Sixers were getting to the finals every other year, and they won it in 83, and they were very good, Doc, and all that. So who do the Eagles have? And they had a bunch of older guys that were on the down end of their years. They were definitely 4. I mean, they were without a doubt number 4 in the city, and even around the league. Nobody cared. The Eagles just weren't an interesting team, and they weren't the worst team in the league, like I said before, but they weren't good, and they were boring. Worse than not being good, they were boring. They had boring players and boring coach, and they had drafted Randall, 85, so that might have been the start of something. But no, Buddy came in and just got and Buddy was perfect in my opinion, he was perfect for the city of Philadelphia. His brashness, his hatred of the Cowboys, just like theirs. It was a good combination. I'm not sure Buddy would have been as popular in a Green Bay or a Minnesota or anywhere. I don't know. I don't know if he would have played as well, but he played well here. Like I said, he had that radio show. I was talking to another writer today about that, how we had to listen to that radio show every Monday night.
Yeah,
because you didn't know what he was going to say. We would have him Monday afternoon at his press conference, but that wasn't enough because. And I'll give you one example. I'm listening to the show one night, and the caller calls and is complaining. I forget the player, but the caller calls and he's complaining about some, I don't know, linebacker or safety or whatever it was, offensive lineman. Buddy, this guy's killing us. Oh, my God, what are you going to do with him? But he says, you don't have to worry about him anymore. I just cut him.
Right.
We didn't know that.
Right. You're scrambling to grab your notebook and call your editor.
No, yeah, I got called this one. I got another story, Buddy. So then we asked Buddy the next day, like, well, Buddy tells us, like, Buddy, why didn't you tell us? Nobody asked. That caller asked.
Yeah. Then, of course, you probably said, yeah, that caller scooped y'all or something like that.
Yeah, right.
Great Buddy Ryan.
It was a lot of fun. A lot of fun.
Talking with Mark Eckel about Buddy Ryan a little bit, and this almost seems like a silly question, Mark, but was there a rift between the offense and the defense during those years? Because we all remember the famous line of, oh, just go make a couple plays, you know?
Well, Buddy would tell Randall to make 5 big plays a game, and the team would win. The defense would do the rest. I wouldn't call it a rift as much as I think some of the defensive guys were so passionate and so Seth Joyner in particular that they would get so upset at some of the guys on offense and Randall in that mix that they didn't work as hard as the defensive guys maybe, or they didn't show the same emotion and passion as the defensive guys. I think that bothered them sometimes. But no, I wouldn't go as far as – not when Buddy was there. I wouldn't say where the problems started was when they fired Buddy and they hired Kotite, and the defensive guys wanted no part of Kotite. They thought that was a bad hire. They would have preferred it if they weren't happy they fired Buddy no matter what, but if they were going to fire Buddy, they wish they would have hired Jeff Fisher to take over. Said they hired Kotite. So they did. That's when the rift became, kind of sizable, too, and that – anytime the offense did anything wrong, the defense was sure to point it out to us. They didn't mind telling us that the offensive line played poorly or that this receiver didn't play well. That's when it got a little nasty.
How about this one, Mark? If the 1991 Eagles won the Super Bowl, are we talking about them as the best defense ever and not the 85 Bears?
Yeah, I think it might be. It'd be real close. I mean, that team was number one across the board and everything. So yeah, you might have. You might. I mean, you could at least argue it.
Mark Eckel, everybody. By the way, Mark, tell us the name of that book again, so people can get some more of these stories that you just talked.
It's called The Eagles, the Big 50. Just the 50 chat. It's published by Triumph Books, and they're doing a series. Obviously, they've done a couple of baseball ones already. I believe the St. Louis Cardinals, and I believe the San Francisco Giants. They're out now, and this is their first one. Their first football one, so I'm kind of flattered that they asked me to do it and do it on the Eagles. It should be out hopefully sometime mid-August, September 1st at the latest, and it'll be right, coinciding with the start of the season. And there's Buddy obviously has his own chapter in the book as well as a lot of chapters that involve Buddy play Reggie obviously and Seth and Clyde and Jerome Brown's passing. So there's a lot of stuff from the Buddy Ryan era in that book. And I talked to Buddy I talked to Buddy for a couple times through the years about, he helped me out a lot with the books. So, like I said, we did keep in touch right up until a couple years ago when he got very sick and it was hard for him to really even talk. And that was kind of sad. So it is his passing, while it's a sad day, he's in a much better place now.
Mark, well, we are flattered that you were able to come on and share some stories with us. That was really good stuff, bringing us back in time. We appreciate it, Mark.
Thank you, guys. No problem. Thank you.